Today we've got a great revenge story coming from human resources. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, play stupid eBay games, win nothing. I was looking for something for my husband for our upcoming wedding anniversary, 6 years, iron. I found something with 3 listings for an almost identical item. The cheapest was a sale price of $23.09 buy it now, from $34.99 with $10.25 shipping. They also had a make an offer. I decided it couldn't hurt and made an offer of $20. Seller declined and immediately took down the listing so I couldn't even buy it at the sale price and relisted for full price. Okay, fine. Next one was a sale price for $21.75 buy it now, from $30 with $14.60 shipping. A couple dollars more than if I had just bought the other one at the buy it now price, but didn't think the seller would be so petty and immediately unlist the item. They also had a make an offer option. I offered $20 to the second seller, they accepted, and I paid within 10 minutes of putting in the offer. Not even 5 minutes after buying the item from the second seller, the first seller sends me an offer for the item with a price of $32. I declined and sent them a message stating that I just bought one for $20. I would have paid the original $23 sale price after they declined my offer if they hadn't immediately taken it down and relisted to play games. Have a nice day. I'm assuming if somebody does that, they're probably some kind of actual consistent eBay reseller. You know, the unfortunate thing here to me is that you can't even really talk bad about this guy to somebody because what platform do you have to talk bad about an eBay seller? I mean, if you turn around and go to somebody that does buy from eBay all the time, they'll probably just say, get in line. There's a number of awful eBay sellers. The unfortunate thing is this guy probably does this all the time, and I assume it might work when there's one of an item out there. It just kind of worked out that there were multiple out there for OP. Funny Boy commented, not eBay, but I once attended an auction that had a large stamp collection offered. The auctioneer asked for a bid and nobody did. He said, somebody make an offer. I offered $1 and no one else outbid me, so I got the entire collection, which was large. My wife is a stamp collector and was very pleased when I gave it to her. Our next story is, what's a little revenge among family? For some background, when I was little, I was one of those prissy kids who would tattle. I'm not proud and I'm grateful I grew out of it. Anyway, back when I was about 5, my grandma was brushing my hair when she dropped the brush, muttering, shoot. Apparently, I misheard and informed her in no uncertain terms that my mother would not appreciate you using that language around me. Grandma's been eating out on that story for over 30 years. Yes, it's as mortifying as it sounds. Yesterday, I got my payback. My mom was talking about something and used the word frickin' for emphasis, and Grandma called her on it. She made a joke about washing Mom's mouth out with soap. Mind you, she's almost 90 and Mom's in her 60s, and teased her about using inappropriate language. Mom argued back that she said frick, which is not a curse. Grandma countered that it was a stand-in for a curse and everyone knows what she meant, so it was just as bad. I saw my chance. I said, so Grandma, if the stand-in for a curse is as bad as the curse, that means I was right to chide you for saying shoot when I was a kid. The look on Grandma's face when she realized she had no defense, priceless. You know, I have a strong opinion on this subject, and I'd like to know if you guys agree or disagree, but personally, I think there's nothing wrong with using words like frickin'. Because I believe at the end of the day, you just need emphasis words. You're just looking for something to kind of accentuate something. And even if it's not something like frickin', which we know is a mirror of the other F word, you're gonna find something that most people would find appropriate enough to hear in public to more or less serve the same accentuation. The only difference is we just haven't completely demonized the word frickin'. Like, let's be real, is it really that much of a revolutionary idea or a censor to say, oh shoot, instead of 2 different letters? Our next story is, boss caused me to lose a management position through a mass redundancy. I was able to return the favor. I held a position as a manager in a retail store of a telco company a while ago. I had previously been a store consultant that got promoted up, so I had experience both of what it was like to be backed by a manager and walked over by others. I knew I wanted to be a manager that backed his staff, so that's what I did. However, my boss was one who would happily throw the staff under the bus and cave to most customer demands if they got even a little upset. Due to our differences of opinion, I didn't last very long in that position. A redundancy was announced for all management, and my boss kept her job but used the chance to get rid of me. Ended up back as general staff. I was pretty ticked off about it and nearly threw my career away with the company with poor performance as I stopped caring about it. I held on as I was a system expert and was frequently consulted on how to fix issues that arose. Happened on a daily basis. Life moved on and bounced to a few different stores within the company and started a new relationship that made me want to start caring about being able to provide again. Luck had me land a secondment in a new position which was out of retail. COVID lockdowns were good to me, only reason the opportunity existed. Managed to perform well in that and get some good contacts and a glowing recommendation from a very senior executive that then helped me apply for and get a permanent position for the company's call center development and processes team. Got my revenge when my team was rolling out a pilot for a new process that would see our call center and retail channels working closely together. Was forecasted some pretty large sales and time benefits. Pretty much every store wanted to be a part of it, and I was the one who got to pick which retail stores which would be due to my background of coming from retail. When the meeting was being held to discuss this, and it was thrown over to me to ask the store managers to submit their interest in participating, I saw my old boss notice me then and see how disheartened she looked in knowing it was up to me. Unsurprisingly, I chose not to select her store. I did pick most of the ones around her though, which saw their performance improve considerably while hers didn't. Not long ago, learned that the store got closed and she got made redundant due to the store underperforming compared to others in the area, as the company decided to close some stores to reduce expenses as a lot of customer interactions had started moving to digital platforms. Edit, my reason for keeping her store out of pilot is that I only expected it to affect her commission bonus, as it is calculated competitively compared to other stores. Normal staff would have been unaffected by this, as they earned it based on individual performance, or at least they wouldn't have lost anything, just not gained like the others in the pilot did. I never expected the store closure. That decision was done well above me. This is obviously a great story, and I'm glad that it worked out so well for OP, but can we all agree that it seems like most managers who experience like this end up being the ones that somehow slide up the food chain? Like where this story comes from, we were basically on the same level and we got to know that we didn't like how the other operated. Most of the revenge stories I hear that involve a bad manager come from, this person is so untouchable in such a high position, and half the time they're a nepo hire and stuff like that. The kind of managers that you feel like would say, "You cannot touch me from my mountain, you peasants." Our next story is, slam your car door into my sister's car. A few years ago, my sister asked me to go to the store and help out in her car as our brother was using mine. Once we got to the store, we pulled into a spot almost the same time as another lady who, upon parking, freaking slammed her door open and hit my sister's passenger door while I gave her the "what" look, and she didn't even acknowledge us and walked away. I told my sister to wait a couple moments, and when the lady was far enough, I slammed open my sister's door, with her permission of course, several times, hard enough to chip paint and made her car alarm go off. We then went and parked in a different spot, which was kinda lame because we were on a spot close to the entrance. Get freaked, lady. As long as you're not gonna get busted for it, this is one of the superpowers of having one of those $1,000 used beater-uppers. Who cares if you're gonna slam open the door and chip somebody else's paint? It came with 2 dents in the car already anyways. Shoot, the taillights have this extra special feature called duct tape holding that together. Ambitious List 7793 commented, "My car was hit by a shopping cart, pushed by a lady who couldn't have been bothered to walk 15 feet to put it away. I got out of my car to look at the damage to my car and yelled at her. She gave me the finger. I saw her heading towards the exit, took her cart and quickly pushed it between cars, and was able to push it right in front of her car. I felt bad she destroyed the shopping cart, but laughed when I saw the damage to her car." Our next story is, creep learns to not ask girls for inappropriate photos. This is an older story, but something on Today I Messed Up reminded me of it, and I figured it was worth sharing. So we'll call Creeper Kevin because he was an idiot, and this concerns my older sister who I'll call Susan. Kevin lived across the street and was friends with my brother. His mom was friends with our mom, and we regularly babysat his little sister. I think it started when we went camping. We got him to go over and feed the cats and fish and water the plants while we were gone. And when we got back, Susan found that someone had been in her underwear drawer. And if I remember correctly, there was a pair missing, but we never really got any confirmation. Well, don't ask how because I don't know, but Kevin had Susan's phone number, and he started asking for inappropriate photos. Susan showed our parents, and the way they saw it, there were two options. They could tell his mom, and we knew that she would absolutely unalive him, or we could freak with him. Susan chose that option. He asked for a hot pic. She sent him a picture of the stovetop with one of the burners on. He asked for a nude. She sent a picture of an ankle. He wanted more explicit, so she obliged. She sent him a picture of a thigh in spandex. He wanted more, so she sent him a picture of a nipple. He didn't ask again, and we let that brew for about a week. Then we told his mom. She was about ready to rip his head off, but then we told her what we did. And we sent him the same pictures, but this time they weren't cropped. You see, dear reader, those weren't pictures of Susan, they were pictures of my bio dad. So that thigh in spandex was his hairy butt thigh in these spandex boxer things he used for his back, and that nip pic the kid did you know what to was a hairy man nipple. His mom was howling with laughter. His mom did have a sit down with him, and she noticed that he wasn't disappearing to his room for a nap for a good long while, and his showers were much shorter. We're pretty sure he was traumatized for life, and he never asked my sister for another picture. Once he asked for one from a girl that she knew, but obviously Susan told her friends about what happened, and the friend sent him the same zoomed-in nip pic. We never heard about him asking another girl for pics. All I can say is, if you're ever going to be at the point in your life where you do feel the need to ask somebody for photos like that, please be in some kind of actual one-on-one relationship with said person. Like, I get it, it's a kid being a dumb kid. But really, what is the success rate of show bobs? Is it in the millionths of a percentile, or is even that being too generous? Money Result 6010 commented, "This is hilarious. When I was younger, I got asked for nudes by a lot of random internet creeps. I was hanging out with my dad when I got asked for one. I turn to dad and say, 'Can you give me a concerned but annoyed face?' So he does, and I take a photo. He asked what I was doing, so I put a caption on the photo. Dad says no and showed him and explained what I was doing. I legit shared this picture of my dad with his permission with my friends, who all used it on creeps too. My dad is 120 kilograms of muscle and is covered in tattoos. To say it was effective is an understatement." Our next story is taking petty revenge for a stolen gift idea and get better shoes in the process. Here goes another round with Clara, my dad's annoying and childish girlfriend. If you haven't read any of the previous Pettiness, you need to know that Clara was quite a case. She tried by any childish manner to keep me and my sisters away from my dad. You also need to know that dad was a good man, but he had some issues about being alone, so he sometimes was too passive about Clara's BS. So here goes. Clara managed to establish a very good relationship with one of my aunts, dad's sister, based on the mutual hate they had for my mom. Let's call her Aunt Marge. One day, Marge went visiting dad, and I saw her in the yard. She came to me and started chatting. One of the topics of that conversation was my dad's upcoming birthday, and Marge asked me about what I would get for my dad. I've always been good picking gifts for people, based on their needs and hobbies. Some time ago, I found a beautiful foldable pocket knife. Dad loved seafood, and he would love to have something like that to open shells, and told Marge about it and where I saw it. My bad. 3 days before his birthday, Dad showed me the birthday gift Clara gave him in advance because she couldn't wait. A beautiful foldable pocket knife, the exact same one I told Marge. I said nothing to him. He looked happy with his gift. I tried to think about a way to pull a revenge against Marge and Clara, but couldn't think of anything good. Revenge would have to wait another year to give me the opportunity. So next year, Dad's birthday, Marge tried to pull the same trick on me. So I told her I would get Dad some very expensive trekking shoes for his trips, and I saw the perfect ones in X store. The trick, I loved trekking shoes. Dad hated trekking shoes because he said they were too dang hot and made his feet sweat too much. We had the same foot size. So I went to a shoe store and bought me some of the shoes Dad really liked, some nice sports shoes at a very nice price. So Dad received from Clara his expensive shoes, and he hated them, but told nothing to Clara, so Clara gave me a smug look, thinking she won again. Some days later, I showed my new shoes to Dad, and he really loved them and told me he wasn't going to use the ones Clara gave him, so I offered him to trade his shoes for mine, since they were both new, and it would be a shame to waste a gift like that. So I got some really nice and expensive trekking shoes and enjoyed listening to Clara yell at Marge on the phone after she knew Dad hated her trekking shoes and gave them to me. So all I need to do to recreate this revenge and get whatever I want for my birthday is to convince Dad to leave Mom, change my feet to be the same size, and convince him to get with somebody that's exactly like Clara. You know, just like Clara found out, I think it would be a bad idea for me to try to copy OP. Mama Bear 50 commented, "I wonder if Marge is going to ask you what you're getting your dad next year. Let her accidentally on purpose overhear you discuss your dad's gift and use the same strategy. What else would you like Marge to buy you? I mean, your dad." Our next story is Christmas Pettiness That Kept On Giving. This is a story about my mom and the absolute depths of pettiness she could sink to. Growing up, we could never put lights on our Christmas tree. My parents would always say it was a fire hazard and would recount a story about one of their first Christmases together when their tree caught fire. Apparently, my dad had fallen asleep on the couch and was woken up to the kitchen and living room filled with smoke. He woke up my mom and got her and the dog out of the house and then ran back inside to check things out. He came out a few minutes later with the tree wrapped in a blanket and threw it into a snowbank, saying it had caught fire. Ever since, they had a no lights in the tree rule to prevent a repeat occurrence. So my whole life, we never put lights on the tree, despite nearly everyone else we knew, including both sets of grandparents, putting lights on their trees. I would occasionally question my parents about it and would always get the same fire hazard story. My mom did go to lengths to make up for it though, with a lot of colorful glass balls that would catch the light, as well as other reflective ornaments. Anyway, years pass, and I'm now an adult. One year I'm talking to my mom and the tree fire story comes up. She chuckles and asks if I'd like to hear the real story. Turns out, that night many years ago, the tree did not catch fire. What actually happened was my dad decided to fix himself something on the stove late at night. He fell asleep on the couch with a pan still on the hot burner, and it eventually began to smoke, waking him up. After he got my mom out of the house and realized what caused the smoke, rather than take the tongue lashing about the ruined pan and irresponsible stove use, he decided to pin the blame on the tree. A few theatrics later, and he thinks he's gotten away with it. He even brought the burnt tree back inside the next day, saying it must not have burnt much because it still looked alright. He might have pulled it off too, had he done more than just thrown the ruined pan into the kitchen trash can. My mom found it in the trash the very next day and put 2 and 2 together pretty quickly. She could have nailed him to the wall right then and there, but she decided to play the long game and didn't say a word. See, it turns out she never cared that much about lights on the tree. It was my dad that really liked them. So next year, and every year thereafter, when they were decorating the tree and he'd go to put lights on it, she would remind him that they couldn't put lights on the tree because of that time it caught fire. I don't think she ever intended for this to be a long-running thing, but my dad was stubborn to a fault and never admitted it was really the pan. So every year she kept his lie going, knowing he was the one paying for it. She did eventually tell him that she knew the truth some 30 years later. He had developed cancer and it was his last Christmas, so she decided to come clean. He just laughed and laughed about it. She gave him the option to do lights on the tree that year, but by then he'd had more years without a lit tree than with, and had grown to prefer the tree the way we always decorated it. I love that in the end, it kind of became the new tradition. And to be fair, when it comes to decorating a Christmas tree, I don't really mind putting ornaments up, but there is something about wrapping the tree in the lights and making sure the plugs are all in the right places that I loathe about the lights. And also, like, you have to make sure the tree's in a place where it's not really going to affect the aesthetics of everything else. Like, if you don't have a very big house, but you put a tree up and you put lights on it, you have a TV set up in the living room, you're gonna be watching the glare of those lights, especially if they're twinkling or whatever. Although I have to admit, rambling about all that has made me feel especially Scroogey right now. Bah humbug. This next story is, when everything is a priority, nothing is. I work in human resources in a highly regulated industry. I support 12 different departments managed by 5 different directors. Onboarding an employee from start to finish takes me about 2.5 hours. If people complete the steps as outlined, I can do it a little bit at a time. For example, complete the application and I can run your initial background checks, complete tax and employment paperwork, I can get the payroll shell set up, get your doctor to sign off on your medical form, and I can do an evaluation of your fitness for work, and the final steps can be done in 10 minutes. Most directors understand this and encourage their applicants to get everything to me and respond to things in a timely manner. One director, John, has never grasped this concept. If his employees aren't ready to start, he calls me. If someone didn't complete their paperwork, he calls me. If someone says they did everything to start, he calls me. Typical conversation starts with John saying, "What's holding up Bob Smith for the Synergy team?" I say, "It looks like he never sent in his license or filled out the I-9. What did he say when you spoke to him?" John replies, "I haven't spoken to him, that's why I'm calling you. He needs to start. This is a priority. Please follow up with him." As you may have inferred, onboarding is one part of my job. I have a lot of other duties, but when someone is ready to go, I make sure that they get done as soon as possible. With John, however, no matter where someone is in the process, it's priority 1 rush. There is no phrase that can make me instantly angry like priority 1 rush, because it's lost all meaning for me. John and I share the same boss, Paul, and Paul had repeatedly told John that he is not to harass me. He needs to understand I have other departments to support and that by demanding everything take top priority, including files that are nowhere near completion, he's taking away from actual priorities. John has promised to stop, but then goes back to it in a week later saying, "But we need him to start. It has to be a priority." Many of these take the form of emails at 4:58 p.m. saying, "George is all set to start. I've told him that he can come in at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Please make sure all of his accounts and equipment are ready for him. This is a priority 1 rush and must be completed." So after the last stunt, I told my boss what I'd love to do. He surprisingly told me to go ahead and he'd be fine with it. The other day, I had a new employee send me his medical file at 2 p.m. He was to work in one of our labs on a project. I was in the middle of the review when another applicant emailed that he had finished his paperwork and CC'd John. This individual was to work in the office in a clerical job. Before I could even respond, John replied to all and included 2 other directors saying that the man would be starting tomorrow to get all of his accounts set up and that this was priority 1. I replied to John, CC'd my boss, and told him I'd make it priority 1. So I immediately stopped working on the scientist's file and began reviewing the clerical employee's file. It was clear that he did not have everything he needed to start, and I was about to send an email telling him as much when another email came in informing me that another applicant for one of our lab teams, a technician, had filled out his I-9. My phone rang and it was John. You can guess where this is going. Sean, the manager, needs this person to start tomorrow. It's critical priority 1 that this person have everything set for tomorrow. I asked him to please send me an email, follow the same protocol as before, dropped the clerical file without another word, and moved on to the technician. As I was in the middle of doing the checks for the technician, the front desk called to say that one of our new hires, a custodian, was having trouble completing the application and that he'd like to have someone sit with him and help him. Knowing how this would play out, I suggested that she call John. Not even a minute late, John was on the phone with me telling me how urgent it was that this person start immediately, how it was my responsibility to provide this support, and how this should be treated as priority 1 rush. I apologized to John, told him I hadn't realized the urgency, and said I would sit with the gentleman and help him. That's exactly what I did. I sat down with him, walked him through everything, and we submitted the application together. Though as he had no physician's clearance, he was nowhere near being close to be able to start. By that point, it was 5:15 p.m. I sent an email to John letting him know that I'd assisted the new hire one-on-one as per his instructions of priority 1 rush and CC'd our boss on it. The next day, my phone began blowing up. A scientist showed up at the lab and there was no equipment for him and they didn't know he was coming. A clerical employee had no accounts and no access to the file rooms. A technician was not set up in the system and none of them existed as an employee with clearance. In every case, my response was the same. My apologies, I was in the middle of processing the file when John demanded I drop it to address a much more important matter. Let me transfer you to him. John showed up at my office screaming and demanding to know why things weren't done. I looked at him surprised and told him I was following his instructions and if something was a priority 1 rush, then it took precedence over everything else. He asked if I seriously thought that helping the custodian fill out his application took priority over getting equipment for a new scientist on a time-critical project. I replied honestly, no, it seemed like a pretty bad decision, but when you said it was a priority, I trusted your judgment and your decision, figuring you knew something I didn't. He called me a moron and walked away. I later found out that he demanded my termination for the stunt. My boss told him that I'd done exactly what he asked and that the blame was entirely on him. He told him he could either trust my judgment to prioritize what needs to get done, or he could deal with the consequences of me following his instructions. Privately, my boss asked me not to do it again because this boss was furious over the whole thing, and he had to admit he sanctioned it to stop my head from rolling. I'd like to say it stopped, but priority 1 rush is still one of John's favorite expressions. Though, thankfully, it's been coming up much less frequently. Does anybody else wonder why OP's boss had to go and lobby for OP and say, no, I sanctioned it to prevent OP's head from rolling? OP literally has it in writing, priority 1 rush. Although you can say what OP did was stupid or malicious or whatever, were they not following direct orders? Surely that is not rising to the level of termination material. Although, to be fair, if this is some place with at-will employment, I guess there's really not much you can do. Bacalor commented, I had one like that. I solved it by responding to each of his emails with a list of the 24 or so things I was working on at the time, with a request that he put them all in priority order so I don't spend time working on non-priority items, and that I would await his response before moving forward with any of them. Each time I copied both of our bosses. Only took 4 or 5 times before he realized I wasn't working on anything before getting his response, and he stopped saying everything was the highest priority. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. Now, if you want to hear another absolutely awesome revenge story, check out that video on the left. Or if you missed my latest video, check out that video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.